Frankly, people have seen 40B developments that haven't taken into account a lot of the town laws and town needs as far as housing for people who are from Plympton. The focus of CPA's community housing requirement is really to create housing that is within, what the community needs and for people who live in the town as well. So if it's elderly housing that's needed in Plympton, folks who can't take care of their large historic home anymore and need something a little bit smaller or more affordable, that's an area where CPA housing funds could be used. In addition, a lot of communities don't know what their housing needs are and have used CPA funds to do an assessment. How are people dealing with the average home value here? Are they able to make a living and pay for their home? That kind of assessment has been done in many communities, and a plan then after that to meet that 10% affordable goal or just to meet the needs of the community. There's an excellent resource available on the communitypreservation.org website that looks like this. I don't know if you can zoom in on the scale, but it just is titled CPA and Affordable Housing. It was produced by the Mass Housing Partnership and the Citizens Housing and Planning Association, and it just gives a lot of actual examples of housing projects that have been done using CPA funds. Everything from the assessments and plans that I talked about to partnerships with Habitat for Humanity. The list goes on. And it's a really good resource. I encourage any voter who's looking, at CPA on their upcoming ballot to really get the facts on what CPA funds are used for. In particular, it seems like there's frequently rumors about housing that just aren't true. So open space, I've driven down Plympton's roads, and I might just consider moving down from Boston. It's so beautiful. And that's really what the Community Preservation Act is all about, is keeping the character of a community intact. So,
right. Is there also under the historic site money for maintenance of cemeteries and all the different buildings within a historic district that has been nationally recognized, like churches and old meeting houses and the old Grange that's now a private home that would be fabulous, horrible to lose in this town. All of those things, and for those of us that worked on getting the historic National Historic Registry for that, it was such a rewarding thing to have that area set aside. But it does need maintenance, and the people that live in those places may eventually need help in keeping them together.
Maybe I'll start on this one, and you can perhaps chime in. You can use historic preservation CPA funds for multitude of projects. Everything from fixing up, repairing your town hall or your municipal buildings that are historic, bringing them up to ADA standards. And you can also use CPA funds for homes that are privately owned that are really valuable assets to the community character. You can use CPA funds for cemetery preservation, for the old mill sites that you were talking about. You can use them to preserve historic documents. So in the town of Boxford, there's these wonderful images of these old leather bound books from the 1600s that list the farmers and their agricultural outputs, and it's just in this beautiful calligraphy, and it's just amazing that these were how records were kept, and that's something that should be a part of that town's history for future generations to enjoy. So those are just a few examples, and actually of all the different uses for CPA funds, historic properties and documents are the #1 use of CPA.
Very good. Can a municipality issue bonds in anticipation of a CPA proceeds coming in?
Yes, though any use of bonds would need to be passed by 2/3 of the town meeting. So rather than just a simple majority, you need 2/3 vote, and you have to stay in CPA until you pay off that bond. So that's another thing to consider, but multiple communities have used bonds to take advantage of opportunities that come up. Sometimes there's an urgent need to protect that farm, or do some sort of project to your town hall, and it requires more funding than you currently have. So you can bond, but it has a couple requirements needed.
Very good. Can a municipality allocate CPA proceeds to cover operating expenses of the Community Preservation Committee? That's a mouthful.
That is a mouthful. Yeah, the quick answer is you can use up to 5% of the CPA funds for administrative purposes, everything from hiring a CPA kind of administrator or someone who's reviewing projects, to just making copies for town meeting, or that kind of thing. And that is an expenditure that needs to be approved at town meeting as well, so up to 5%.
Well, can the money in the Community Preservation Fund be used to match state funds or federal funds for projects? So you could take and be allocated X amount of dollars, and then go after even private funding to match that and add to it to complete a project.
Yeah.
Yes, you can. There's there's many projects, and one that's very, very close to us was in Duxbury. The O'Neill Farm. It's on Winter Street. A working dairy farm, still a working dairy farm. They used CPA funds that the town had in place. They had APR money from the state, and then they also raised private funds. So they had a collaboration, 3 different funding sources to buy this farm, put some money in escrow to help with the running of this farm. That's been several years now since that's taken place. On this year's ballot, they've also approved more money to buy more acreage to help support the farm, so they can produce forage to feed the cows. And the land, part of the land is actually in Kingston. So Duxbury is using CPA money again to bolster what they have there. One of the other things you can do with it is create walking trails. And they do have walking trails now on parts of this farm. Obviously not in with the cows, but it's one of the things that Plympton could also do. We have town forest land, and we could create walking trails with some of that.
Yeah, I think this has actually been one of the most impressive parts of the program is how towns have used their CPA funding as just a seed to apply for grants